It's time for the For My Dogs podcast, where we help men become the best version of themselves and highlight that we can't do it alone. My name is Tucker, and I'm here with my co-host, Johnny. Our commitment to you is to make this a space for fun, vulnerability, honesty, and community. We have a great episode today. It's our Mailbag episode, part 1. Got some great questions in from our listeners that cover the gamut of sports and NIL, transfer portal. We got some questions about religion and Christianity, and some questions about how to be a great friend and how to hold your friends accountable, even if they may be mad at you initially. So you're in for a treat. Tune in, lock in. It's a long one. We hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Johnny, we got our mailbag episode today. Our people showed up, man. We got many questions that we're actually going to have to split this into a 2-part episode. So thank you guys so much for participating and for sending in so many good questions. We got together yesterday and broke them all up into different categories. So we'll kind of tackle the different categories one at a time. But thank you so much for sending in questions. We hope that, Johnny and I's responses, thoughts, and opinions add value to your life in some way, shape, or form. And if they don't, then I apologize in advance for wasting your time. But Johnny, how about you read us out question numero uno?
Yeah. So again, this echoing off Tucker, thank you for these questions. I did not think we were going to get this many. So this part right here is going to have to be, we're going to categorize this as like a football/sports category question. So question number 1 comes from Mr. Steven, and it says, when do you think Oregon will win the Natty? Tucker, what's your response on this one?
Before the world of NIL and college football, I probably would have told you never. Because, and they've come close a couple times. But, Steven, please don't hate me for saying this. But the lifeblood and the majority of talent in recruiting, as everyone knows, is in the Southeast. And Oregon is just a long, long way from the Southeast. And most of these guys want to play at least close enough to their families to where, their people can come watch them play. And but I would change my answer now because of the different climate of college football. Now that, there's no salary cap, there's no limits on transfers. And with NIL being introduced, Oregon has one of the wealthiest people as an alumni of their school, right? The creator of Nike, Phil Knight, is backing their football program. And he's publicly said, he wants to do whatever it takes for Oregon to win a national championship. And I do think Dan Lanning is a great coach.
Amen.
And a good recruiter. And so
comes from a great school.
We don't have to talk about that. That's in the past. Johnny, at church today, they were just talking about the passage where Paul says, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what is ahead. So
there's also
that's what you need to do with Dan Lanning.
Well, if we do that, then my whole history teacher job is out the window then. So my whole job refers to talking about the past. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely just ripped that verse out of context.
Yeah, all the way.
So, oh well, but it was funny. It was a good jab.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my answer. Is in today's world, I think Oregon could. In the previous iteration of college football, I didn't think they could.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about Oregon. I mean, I'm not a big Oregon fan. I love the coach, Dan Lanning. I just think that maybe the schedule, maybe we can get a tougher schedule so that we can start having better games. Because yes, I know they made it to the playoffs, okay, but maybe we can get a tougher schedule in there, and that we can get it to where we might be able to win more games. I don't know. That's not really a good answer for me, but I would like to continue on to the next question because I think it would answer more of this issue. And so,
well, and I didn't give so he has to win. When do I think
win? I said
Oregon
how?
will win the
Win?
Natty? So I'm going to say, next year their schedule is a cakewalk.
That's what I'm
their
saying.
only tough game is Penn State.
Yeah.
But it all depends on how the bracket lays out, because this year they were the 1 seed and they had the toughest matchup, right? So I'm gonna say how long has Dan Lanning been at Oregon? 2 years?
Yep.
I'm gonna say it'll take him till year 7.
Year 7.
That's gonna be my prediction.
I'll say so. Year 7. I'll say year 4. I'll go under. We're playing prices. The price is right here.
We're setting
yeah. But yeah, so I'll do that one. But let's go to the next question because I think we can talk about that a little more.
Yeah.
And here I can ask it as well. So this is from Mr. Gray, the famous Gray.
Also, so this question got asked by multiple people.
Oh, sorry.
So I do want to give credit to Candace too, who asked this, which is your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Can't forget about Candace.
No, never would do that. So with the impact of the transfer portal and NIL and mental toughness, I like it already. Will colleges with the most money consistently be the best? I want to elaborate on this. A few years ago when we lived in Greenville, the church we went to, the coach for the baseball team went there. And I was asking him, I was like, man, so like, do you like talk with the football coach, whatever? And what's his take on this whole NIL deal? And he said that he was like, he hates it because ECU, it's no like big news to anyone. They're not the greatest. But he said that at ECU, they build these guys who are like, quote unquote nobodies and get them to be like really good football players. And then they leave to go somewhere else with the NIL and another team gets to benefit from that. And so to that answer, yes, I do. And with the mental toughness thing, yeah, you're teaching kids if I can't start here, I'll just go somewhere else. And I think it's hurting them for the long run. So yes, I unfortunately do think that the teams with the most money are going to be able to do this. I'm not saying that's right, but it looks like that's the path that it's going towards.
Yeah, and I think, just to clarify, I think Gray was kind of asking a 2-part question is A, how does transfer portal NIL impact players' mental toughness? And then B, will the teams with the most money just dominate year in and year out? So I'd say to the first part, it absolutely, I think, is going to have an impact on the long-term mental toughness of these athletes, not just what's happening right now. I just saw on the Pat McAfee show, they were talking about how in the NFL, there's coaches and players coming out saying that there's a lack of accountability with a lot of these young players coming into the league. And I just found that fascinating that it's even the NIL and college or transfer portal hasn't even been around that long, and it's already made this entitlement and this just lack of being able to go through adversity and lack of accepting accountability and allowing people to hold you accountable. That has already made it up into the highest realm of football. And so I do think it's having a major impact. And I think when we look at our own lives, the way you develop resilience and mental toughness is by going through really difficult, challenging things and finding a way to get on the other side of it. And so many of these players, which I don't exactly fault the players. I fault the fact that the NCAA didn't get ahead of this. And so when the lawmakers went around them and made these things legal and put them into action, there were no rules, no regulations, no guardrails, no boundaries. And so because of that, you just have these kids who are getting life-changing money thrown at them as backups, as guys who aren't playing. And it's like, what do you want? I mean, these are 17, 18, 19-year-old kids just getting crazy money thrown at them to go somewhere else and be a starter when they are sitting on the bench where they're at. And they may come from a home situation that like is in poverty. They grew up in a rough neighborhood. Their family struggles to put food on the table. And like, what do you expect them to do? You know? Now that's not every player's case, but like, I just think this was not set up in a way that's best for the athlete. I think players should be getting paid and getting portions of the amount of profit that college football makes because the players are the product, along with the traditions and the passion of the fan base and all of those things too. But they needed somebody to build in some guardrails and some boundaries to this thing. And that's where the NCAA just put their head in the sand and thought it was never going to happen. And they were resistant to change. And so they lost all credibility as that organization. And so now it's going to take somebody else stepping up to, and I hope it's Nick Saban, to kind of pull in the reins on this, put in some salary caps. Because, like, you can't have a team who has $30 million of NIL money to play with and the other team has $3 million. Those two teams shouldn't be playing on the same field. Like, they would never do that in the NFL, ever. So I do think it's a massive problem.
Well, it's getting worse because it's in high schools now.
Yeah.
Like high school has NIL deals, which is crazy. Like you think college kids aren't capable enough of handling that money. Someone who's like 18, 17 years old, no way can they do that. And so like it is getting worse. And the fact that a high school is getting there and, bringing in Georgia to this, they interviewed Gunnar Stockton and they said, do you think that you will ever go and like into the portal? He said, never. He said, this is the school I've always wanted to play at, and I'm here until I leave. And I was like, yes, sir. Come on, let's do this. Okay. So yeah, but no, I agree with you. And if it's getting to the high school, it's already gotten bad. So you saying until it gets worse, it's already there.
And I don't think we're going to see the negative side effects of it until these players are far enough into the league where they're at that point in their career where they're like looking back and reflecting, or even the players who don't make it to the NFL who look back, whenever they reach that point in life where they're like reflecting on just how their years in college went. I think there will be a lot of guys who come out and say, yeah, I shouldn't have transferred every year I was in college to a different program. I think that hurt my development as a player and as a man. Or you'll have guys say, you know what, I chased the money, but it ended up not being the best situation for me. So, hindsight, I wish I would have just stayed where I knew I could be developed. Or
talk about marriage and a job. Have some commitment to a place.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there was I was talking to Candace about this, and I don't remember the basketball coach, but it was a basketball coach, and they had like a decent year, and then his entire team is like left, and he was like, "What happened? Like, why are y'all leaving?" And they were like, "Sorry, coach, we're gonna get paid to go over here." And it's like, stick with it. You can't just like quit a job every year. You can't, if things are going rough in your marriage, you can't just quit on that. Like sometimes you gotta like dig your heels in and keep going. It's going to like, but I'm on a rant right now. But like as a teacher, we're just now seeing like we're seeing the effects of COVID when kids were just like strictly virtual, and that was like what 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, to your point, I don't think we'll see the effect now. It will be like 4 or 5 years, later that we'll start seeing the negative effects of it.
Yeah, and for the schools that have money, I'm sure they're loving this because let's be real, schools were always paying players, but now everybody can do it.
Oh yeah,
and it's legal, and so these schools who have just very wealthy alumni who care about the football program are able to put together some really nice teams. We saw it with Ohio State and winning the national championship, right? They put $20 million into that roster and it paid off. They clearly had the best players on the field throughout the whole playoff. I mean, the talent level between them and the other teams they played, there was clearly a gap. And so, but then it was crazy because after the national championship, you have all these rumors flying about their
Leaving.
top receivers getting millions of dollars thrown at them. It's like they just won a national championship at the program they're at, and they were playing.
Yeah.
And they're entertaining, allegedly, offers to go somewhere else. Yeah.
No, I've seen it. Yeah. Like, I mean, like the day after the game, or the week after the game, there's rumors. So like, it's just like, yeah, there's no commitment at all. And it's just who has the most money. And I mean, and like, it's like the NBA. The NBA is not a team sport. It's a player sport. You watch your players go to each team. You don't only care about a team.
Well, and I think Saban talked about that on some podcast or something, but he was saying that's one of the reasons he got out of it is because you can't hold players accountable anymore. You can't,
Yeah.
you can't really like coach players hard anymore because now they don't have the willingness to stick it out and go through that adversity and like figure out a way to get better. And as a fan, it's hard with this new era because like you want to go get all the players that are in the portal because you think it's going to help your team. So like, we got one of Notre Dame's offensive linemen. He started some this year, but not the full season. But we went and got him in the portal, and he entered the portal with a no contact clause, meaning he entered the portal saying, no one reach out to me, and then shortly after scheduled a visit to Tennessee. What that tells me is Tennessee's people were in contact with him, or he was in contact with Tennessee's people very shortly after the national championship game and made up his mind that that's where he wants to go, which is like crazy. But as a fan, I'm like, you needed interior offensive linemen. So like, I'm glad he's coming to play for us. And like Georgia's picked up a whole slew of receivers in the transfer portal, which you guys need it because your receivers last season dropped the ball a lot. I think you would, admit that as well.
Oh yeah.
So I hate it as a fan, but I also know like it's helpful to us to be able to reload and like get better as a team to take that next step.
Let me give you some advice from Mr. Craig over here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just dipping into my personal life, and I probably shouldn't share it. But we're talking about being vulnerable. One time, I dated a girl who was dating another guy and left him to go date me. And I never thought that she would leave me to go with another guy. And my dad said, son, if she's going to leave a guy to go to you, she'll leave you to go to another guy. And I was like, you're full of it. Well, she did. And I was blown away. My dad was just like sitting there like, I told you. So
that's words of wisdom from
that was
Craig
a dumb
Gardner.
moment in my life. But same thing with college football. If a player's going to leave a school who he's committed to come to you, don't think he won't do the same thing to another school.
Yeah, that's 100% true. 100% true. And, I'll segue us into the next question because I think
I hate the next question.
Well, I know. And it's related to what we just talked about. So people out there are starting to murmur, Johnny, saying that in today's new college football world, the Big Ten is set up better than any other conference to succeed because they have numerous wealthy alumni. So our good friend Scott, who we've talked to, well, I don't know that we've mentioned his name before, but we talked about the one obnoxious Big Ten fan that we know who is a Michigan fan. And he sent in a question. And he actually sent it in the form of an article where Paul Feinbaum said that the Big Ten owns college football now. Now, I read the article, and Paul Feinbaum, what are you doing, dude? You're an SEC guy. You're on SEC now every weekend, and you have a show on SEC Network. Like, what are you doing? But when you read the article, he says, at this moment, Big Ten owns college football. And the only reason he's saying it is because they've won the last two national championships, which, fair, okay? They did. And we know this year that Ohio State went out and dropped a bag to put together a championship roster. That might have happened last year with Michigan. I don't know. But Michigan's They've had some people come out recently saying they're going to back them. Literally, one of the wealthiest guys in the world, is backing them because his wife went to Michigan, not even because he did. And then you got Dave Portnoy and all those guys. So
No. Yeah.
all of this are reasons why people are saying like the Big Ten's going to take the SEC spot as being the dominant conference in college football. So to answer Scott's question of does the Big Ten own college football now, I'm going to say no, because it's just been 2 seasons. Let's pump the brakes. Now, they do have money, but it's still just top heavy. Big Ten top to bottom is still not as deep as the SEC. It's the same teams as it always has been. And I want to get to your thoughts, Johnny, but this was the first time the Big Ten's won back-to-back national championships since the 60s. Since the 60s. So, Johnny, let's take a tour back through college football championships, okay?
Oh, yeah,
This year,
please.
you had Ohio State. Last year, Michigan. Before that, you had...
Who were the two? There was 2 back-to-back.
There's-
I don't remember who those were.
Oh, yeah. There was one SEC team who won it back-to-back, which was Georgia. And then you had Alabama before them, LSU before them. So that's 4 in a row, SEC. Then you had Clemson. Then you had Bama again. Then you had Clemson. Then you had Bama. And then Ohio State in the first college football playoff. So they won the first of the 4 team and the first of the 12 team. And Florida State before that. Then listen to this, okay? Listen to this, Johnny. You got Bama, Auburn, Bama, Florida, LSU. That's 6 in a row. 6 in a row. Then you had Texas, who's now an SEC team. And I mean, you go back you can just keep going down the list. Like SEC just had a run of dominance that I don't see Big Ten just automatically jumping into that stratosphere of success, but I could be proven wrong, but I'm not ready to jump into that wagon yet.
Well, let's if we're going to what qualifies as being a powerhouse, because I was looking up the top 25 teams. There were 7 SEC teams in the top 25, and I think there were 5 Big Ten teams. Okay, so if you're talking about powerhouse are the top 25. Those are the best schools in the nation, and the SEC still has more schools than that. And so what qualifies as that? And I think that it was Ole Miss and Bama were the first 2 out in the playoffs too. So we could have had more SEC teams in the playoffs as well. And your Indiana, that head coach, he thinks their team is the best. And you know what? I think your pride is your fall, because you're not the best. But the main Big Ten teams were the ones that were in the playoffs, and that's all you face. SEC's teams are hard to play, and that's why our record might be not as good as Ohio State's record would be, because we played harder teams throughout the schedule. Okay, and same for Tennessee, the same for Bama, same for Ole Miss. And so we had 7 SEC teams in the top 25. Big Ten had 5. To me, that still means that SEC is still a powerhouse team. They had the most teams in the top 25. So that's what I don't understand is, how does that mean that we're not a powerhouse? How does that mean that we're still not the best? Because, oh my gosh, the next day after Georgia lost, oh my Lanta, the social media went crazy, and I had to get off the TV, and I was like, this is hot garbage. This is not true. And I know the SEC is annoying. I know, because oh my, they think they're the best. I mean, look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie.
And go look at ESPN's top 300, and you tell me how many players are from a state in the South.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, ACC did not do well at all in the playoffs and also in the bowl games. SEC did not do great either, but we still landed in the top. We still landed 7 in the top 25. We're still a powerhouse team. You know what? Good job, Ohio State, you're the better team this year. It does not mean your conference is a better conference.
That is a good way to sum it up, Johnny. Way to put a bow on it.
But man, when I saw that question, I told Tucker, I was like, please, can we not? Like, Scott knows how to just like grind my gears with that question.
Yeah. He's a gaslighter. That's
He's a
exactly
gaslighter.
what
Gets me
Scott
so
is.
fired up.
Yeah. So the next question I'm excited about answering, and I'll try and keep it brief. This is from Joey. This is who gave me my first chance at coaching middle school football. So shout out to Joey. You're one of the good coaches out there, so keep it up. You do great work with those kids. So Joey asked, is AAU, and I'm going to paraphrase, but also just like specialization hurting youth sports? Or is it helping or hurting, I guess? So for those of you who may be unfamiliar, AAU is like the baseball and basketball leagues that run pretty much year round, and you kind of have to commit to that sport in place of playing other sports so that you can be on these teams that are supposedly the best and will develop you the most and all those things. You got to pay a lot of money to be a part of it, and it's really causing kids to pick a sport and stick with it at a very young age. So my personal opinion is that this is actually hurting youth sports and the development of young athletes. And if you've ever listened to Greg Olson's podcast called Youth Inc., I think he agrees with this, and he's had a bunch of people on to talk about it. And you should listen to the podcast. It's actually really, really good, especially if you have young kids playing sports. But I think it's hurting because athletes become more well-rounded and less prone to injury by playing more than one sport, because different sports work and focus on different muscles and different skills, and you learn different lessons through playing certain sports over others. One of my biggest regrets going back to like middle school and high school is I wish I would have tried and played more sports than I did. I only played football and basketball, and then junior and senior year of high school, I only played football. But I wish I would have done more because it would have made me better at football. Like if I would have wrestled or swam, I would have been in much better shape for football season than I would have just normally. And so, but along with that, these kids are having to pick a sport at like age 9 or 10. Some of these leagues are starting. It's like, how do you know at that age what sport you want to focus in on and play, through high school and your college years? That should be the time where you're trying to play as many sports as possible to figure out what you like and what you want to keep doing. And the money side of it, I also think is hard for parents. And I feel for parents who are doing this for their kids because they feel like they have to. It's being set up as this is the only way your kid is going to be able to make it to the next level and develop into the athlete that you think they're capable of being. And so you got to pay all this money. You got to give up all your weekends to be at the ball field or at the basketball courts, and all with a promise of your kid's not going to be as good as they could be just playing in rec league. So you need to come play with the best of the best. And I feel for parents. Like that's a really tough position to be in. You want the best for your kids, but I would just throw out the caution to sit down and think about, is this actually what's best for your kid? Is this actually helping them develop into the man or woman that they need to be and the best athlete that they can be? And I would just throw that question out there, and you got to come up with your pros and cons of what you think and actually think through it for yourself. Me personally, I don't think it's what's best for these kids. I think when they start seriously getting recruited in high school, yeah, maybe that's a time and they feel pretty confident in the sport that they're going to go play in college. Maybe that's the time you can specialize and focus on one. But until then, I don't think it's good for these young athletes.
I also, like you and I were talking about this at lunch yesterday, is like I'm not going to force my kids to do sports. I'm going to encourage the crap out of them though to do sports. But I would like basketball and soccer. I think those are like the most like universal sports like worldwide out there that no matter what country you go to, and like mainly like everyone knows how to play those sports. And so I would do that for like a social thing, widen that out. But also, we said this before, is like like you can get different coaches, like you might learn something that can help you out in another sport as well. And so it's going to help you not only socially so that you can like play with a bunch of other kids and different sports, not be just like the one sitting there and not knowing how to play the game, but also like physically, it's going to help you be a better athlete if you know how to play these different sports and be coached under different kind of people. And so, yeah, I highly recommend more than one sport. Doing one sport at a time is also might burn you out as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it way too early, you might get burned out and you might hate that sport when you might have had the potential to be a really good athlete in that sport as well.
Yeah. And I've heard stories of that happening to kids. It's really sad.
It is sad. Yeah.
Because they loved it. They loved that sport, but then they played it so much that they just, they got burned out.
Yeah. The next question comes from Mr. Nathan Haddon. He says, what is a way too early prediction for next season? Now, do you want to do just like in general or SEC?
He said predictions.
Predictions.
So let's say both.
For both? Okay.
Let's give your national championship pick and SEC champ pick.
So, for Georgia, I'm just going to say for Georgia. I'm not saying Georgia. I don't want to say national championship yet. We did get the Branch brothers, which was an amazing steal. However, talking about the NIL, was it last year, the year before, we had like that guy, the number one quarterback, and then like right before the season started, he went to Nebraska. And I was like, okay. So like I got all excited preseason, and then this happened. So we got the Branch brothers, was really good. I think that having Gunnar Stockton being actually like the starter in practice is going to help out a lot. I haven't heard any more on the rumors of, Bobo leaving, so that may not be the case. But I don't know. I think the Georgia will still be in top 5. I looked this up and I like just to see who would be the like way too early predictions, and ESPN had Penn State, and I was like, what is the hype on this school? I do not understand
it. I will never understand.
Yeah, I don't understand the hype with Penn State, but I don't think that Texas is going to be a big like. That's just my early prediction. Is I think that Manning is like overhyped to the extreme. Like when he played, because he came in for Georgia when Georgia played him both times, and he struggled hard. Yeah, I know he's a new quarterback, but like I think his last name is what's getting the hype over him, and so I don't see. This is a way too early prediction. I see Texas being maybe 10th in the end or below. I don't see them being in the top 10.
I would agree, just because they did the same thing with Nico last year. They really hyped him up, but it was his first year as a starter, and you saw him have growing pains and a learning curve. And I think the same will happen with Arch, even though, he sat behind Ewers for 2 years instead of 1. But anytime you're stepping into starting full time, there's going to be a learning curve. What did you give your national championship pick?
My national championship pick? I don't know. I was reading on this, and they're now hyping over Miami, which is just like makes me frustrated because I don't agree with that. But I will say I don't know. I don't know who my way too early national championship would be. I haven't really done much research on everybody else. So, maybe I don't know. I think that I'm gonna say Georgia. I'm gonna recant my statement. I'm gonna go back to Georgia just because I don't want to be the one fan who didn't have faith in Georgia. So I'm gonna say Georgia. Why not?
Okay. Yeah, why not? So yeah, I'm gonna agree with you, Johnny. In the SEC, I do think some teams that are typically at the top will take a step back this year, solely because they have first-year starting quarterbacks. Ole Miss going to have a new quarterback. Alabama going to have a new quarterback. Georgia going to have a new quarterback. Who else? Missouri going to have a new quarterback.
We were so wrong about them in the beginning.
Yep. Florida has DJ Lagway. He played some this year, but again, it's his first full year as a starter. So the ups and downs of the season, who knows? I do think Florida will be sneaky good. But for those reasons, and in just the time that Heupel's been at Tennessee, year 2 is when the quarterbacks take a significant leap. So I'm thinking Nico takes a big leap this next season. We beat you guys at home, and we beat either Alabama or Florida on the road. So I'm going to say Tennessee goes 10-2, is in the SEC championship, wins it, and goes all the way and wins the Natty.
You lost
But
all your receivers.
Yeah, but they weren't that good. So bye. Let's get some better ones in there. Youth movement.
You have a lot of growing to do as a team. Like, you lost a lot of guys, but that's fair.
But we have the most important positions, and we're returning a lot on defense, and we shored up the offensive line. So, yeah, and I know I'm a unrealistic optimist, and I will wear that badge. But I'm convincing myself now that we're going to have a better season next year.
I mean,
I think we're close.
Nathan should have assumed that we were going to pick each team. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think that. I mean, I think Georgia will go further than we did this year. I don't know about our national championship per se, but I'm want to have faith, but I'm trying to be realistic with it.
Yeah. And I honestly pray and hope that it's a Tennessee-Georgia national championship. I would absolutely love that. Or an SEC championship. Either one I'll take.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
So last football question.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty deep into this already, but
you guys ask good questions.
Yes.
So.
And this one I like. It's from Evan at your church. And it is favorite and worst plays of the season. So let's end on a good note. Let's say the worst plays first. Okay. And then we'll end on a good note with the favorite play. So what is your worst play of the season?
Well, almost all of the worst plays, I would say, were in that Ohio State playoff game in the first round. I mean, you had 2 of the touchdowns that they caught the first touchdown Jeremiah Smith caught, the quarterback just threw an absolutely perfect pass. It's not that like there was a blown coverage or something like that. So that was heartbreaking. Then they threw a pass to Mecca Ibuka downfield, and he just made like an insane catch that normally isn't going to be completed. And then after that, they started running the ball because they were like first and goal, and the quarterback went to pull the ball, and it started to pop out, and the running back caught it on his hip and, kept it. Whereas we had like 3 guys there who would have jumped on it if he would have dropped it. And then they ended up scoring. So those were a couple of the worst plays. The Arkansas game, I'm not remembering any specific. Well, Nico running out of bounds at the very end sucked because then we just didn't even give ourselves a chance. I'm trying to think of what else. The Georgia game, I know there was a specific play there. There's one with Squirrel White. I can't remember what happened, but it was like a huge momentum turning point in that game. So yeah, those are a few just rattled off the top of my head.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking with Gunnar Stockton's first game, he was throwing and hitting guys in the chest, and they were bouncing off of him. So that was really frustrating. Or when Marcus Freeman did that whole trick play and we just fell for it and jumped off sides, that was awful. But if I had to think of my the moment where I was the most mad was the Alabama game. When we were losing the entire game, we come back, make a touchdown. I think it was we were 34-33 or something like that. It was 1 point away, and I'm we're gonna win this game. We're gonna win this game. And then the next,
so too.
And then the next play, Bama scored a touchdown, and I just sat in the chair and I was my gosh, and I was why does this keep happening to us? And that was I think I was the most mad in that game with Georgia because we just can't. What's a mental game with Bama? I don't understand. But now,
so what's your best place?
My favorite play was, and I'm not saying this because it was like a 6 or 8 overtimes with Georgia Tech, but when Cash Jones ran after Lovett caught the touchdown, Cash Jones jumped up and like popped him on the head, and as soon as he popped him on the head, fireworks shot out. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
That was amazing, and I was like, gosh, that was just like a magical moment for us. Just like hit him, and he cued the fireworks. It was amazing.
That was pretty sweet. So, do you have any more?
No, I mean, I was thinking about that one because after that, I was just more frustrated. This was a frustrating season.
Yeah, so I have 2 that stick out to me, and it's because they were both in rivalry games. I will say till the day I die, like, yes, Georgia is a rivalry, but I hate Alabama and Florida more than any other rival that Tennessee has, and Alabama is chief among them. So the Alabama game, when Nico hit Chris Brazzell in the end zone to take the lead, I went crazy. I like lost my mind, and it was such a good catch. And I mean, the crowd was going crazy, and then the crowd really had an impact on Alabama when they got the ball back. So that was just an awesome moment. I was watching it with Haley and my mother-in-law, Kelly, so they got to experience me lose my mind, which was fun. Then I came to your house with Craig.
Yeah. And I
celebrated.
I said, he's going to be so obnoxious when he gets here. And you were, but you had every right to be.
I was. Yep. And then my second one would be in the Florida game. Florida had it at the 2, I think. And we're about to score, and James Pierce, they tried to do a QB sneak, and James Pierce came around, stripped the ball out. We got the turnover and ended up winning that game. That was a huge, like, momentum turning point. And Tennessee historically struggles so much against Florida. It does not matter how bad Florida is. We just, like, never play good against them. So to get a win against them and Alabama in the same year was huge. And so I love that.
I got another one as beating Texas twice.
Yeah.
Was my favorite. And so then they say that when Longhorns do this means that's how many times they lost to Georgia. I love that.
Yeah. That is pretty funny.
But yeah, so
we made it through all the football and sports
talk.
questions, which those were great questions, obviously, because it took us almost 45 minutes to get through them. So we're going to switch it up, go into some more deeper questions. And the first few we got, and that'll probably be all we get to for this podcast, are religious questions. If we have the time, we'll do a few more, but for right now, I think that's what we'll have the time to get to. So up first, and we're also going to leave names out of the questions for the rest of this episode, just out of respect of who asked them. We want to keep it anonymous just in case it's a sensitive question or something they're dealing with. So first one is, what are our opinions on tattoos and Christianity? Johnny, I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, this one's a sensitive topic because I have a couple of tattoos, and I remember I got my first tattoo when I was 18, and I walked into church, and I mean, this is a very vivid image for me. A guy told me that I just lost my salvation.
Oh,
and I was like, you know what? That was super edifying for you to say, and also
so encouraging.
Also super incorrect. But the verse comes from Leviticus 19. Where it says, you shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourself. So let's just also talk about other verses that they missed out. So the verse right before that says, do not cut your hair at the sides of your head, and do not clip off the edges of your beard. And then before that, it also says, nor shall you wear a garment of cloth made of 2 kinds of material. So as if you still have never cut your hair or your beard, and you only wear 1 kind of material, then yeah, okay. And so then that means you can't have a tattoo. So these were laws in Leviticus that are not applied to anymore. I'm not saying the Old Testament's not applied to. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that these were laws that were set for a certain time. And even with this tattoo, it was meant for worshiping and for the dead. If you're doing this to worship the dead, it is not saying you can't get a tattoo. It's saying if you're not doing this to worship the dead. And so it's taken way out of context, especially in the South, a lot of churches. So one, it never said no tattoo. It was saying worshiping for the dead. And two, there's other laws in there that you're missing that you don't follow either. So don't come after me.
Yeah, and that passage you mentioned, let's just talk about the laws in general, right? A lot of people have questions about that. The purpose of God giving Israelites the laws that he did, so many of them are tied to them being set apart from the rest of the world, so that God's people were distinct and recognizable from the rest of the world. So the not wearing two types of material and not cutting your hair or your beard, all of that was because there were cultural practices at the time in the world around them where people were doing the opposite of that. So this was a way to identify Israel in the midst of what was going on. So the tattoo remark is in historical context about people from other cultures who did not follow Yahweh, Israel's God. They would worship the dead and worship these false pagan religions. Well, I don't even want to say false. They were probably worshiping spiritual beings, just not good ones. They were worshiping demons and these pagan, just spiritual ways of worship. And part of that was doing self-harm, so cutting yourself and making marks on your body that represented these small g gods or demons, whatever you want to call them. That's what God is saying Israel shouldn't do. Now, when you look at people getting tattoos today, most of the time, that's not why people are getting a tattoo. Now, in some cases, I'm sure that still goes on, but I also have a tattoo, and it's not, the tattoo that I have is a reminder to me that I'm here to serve others as Jesus served his disciples. It actually is encouraging and edifying me to be more like Jesus. You're going to say that Jesus is going to be mad at me for that, or, is going to come at me for that? I don't think so. So this is just a lesson in reading the Bible. Always look into the context surrounding a verse, just surrounding like a whole book and then the whole Old Testament. Try and put what you're reading into the context of the full picture, and also look into historical context because it can give a lot of meaning behind what's going on there.
Yeah,
so
don't just read one verse and then take of that. Read the verse before and after. You can't take one out of context, because that's what this is. This is taken out of context, is what this is. So yeah. So I'll
also say, for some people just don't like tattoos and don't want to get them.
And that's fine.
That's great. That's that's a decision you want to make, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what all Johnny and I are trying to say is if you did get a tattoo and you're a Christian, you're not gonna be punished or outcasted. It's okay.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
But you don't have. We're also not saying you need to go get a tattoo. It's up to you. It's a personal choice. We're just trying to show how that verse is taken out of context. So.
Yeah. So the next one is a question, I guess, just about reflection, and it says, was there ever a time you had to step in and call out a brother who wasn't seeing the whole picture, all because you cared for him? So I guess I can answer this, because I have one where I personally did this for somebody, and I think you had one where you had someone did this for you. And so I remember there was a time when my buddies and I used to work out together, and there was a time where we would do this to keep each other physically accountable, but also spiritually, because while we worked out, we would be checking in on each other. So that was the time that we hung out and would ask each other how we're doing and how can we be helping each other out. And for one buddy, when we asked how he was doing, he said that he would really need help keeping accountable of not hanging out with this certain group of friends, because every time he hangs out with them, he always gets drunk and gets high. And he said that he wants to stop doing that, and if we could help him out. Was very explicit with that. Well, we're walking out of the gym and we get to our car, and these buddies happen to pull up to the gym as well. And and they invite my buddy to go hang out with them. And he goes, all right, he's like, hey man, he's like, all right, I'm gonna go hang out with these. And we're like, you just told us that you did not want us to do this. He goes, no, it's fine. So then I step in and I said to his friends, and I said, hey, he's not hanging out with you tonight. He's gonna come hang out with us. Enjoy your time at the gym. And they got kind of frustrated. And my buddy, who just asked me to keep him accountable, got mad at me. He was like, what are you doing? He was like, you're embarrassing me in front of my friends. Well, the other guy that I was with is much bigger than me. And he steps up and he goes, he said he's not going. You, points to my buddy, get in the car. We're leaving. And my buddy was super mad at us. He got in the car. He was super mad at us. And he was just complaining how we embarrassed him and everything. And we go back and we just kind of like do our separate thing. And he comes to us later and was like, okay, you know what? I am glad you did that, because I did just ask you to do that. I was caught up in the moment. Thank you for stepping in, even when I didn't want you to. And so that was a cool moment. And it was like happened really fast. And we like physically got my buddy out of a situation. And he was mad at first, but he eventually did see the light on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I have a similar experience just on the receiving end of it. So in high school, this was probably sophomore year. And just to set the scene, at the time, I tried to look like a good kid who did all the right things. And, I went to church with my family some. I would have told you I was a Christian if you asked me, but I was far from the Lord. I did not know Jesus. He was not what I was looking to satisfy me. And so what I was chasing, and this is what we're all prone to when we don't have Jesus, we're not following Jesus, we look for all these other things to satisfy us, whether it be money or drugs or sex or whatever, you name it. So for me at this time, I felt the cultural pressure and the social pressure, but also just like, I think it, at its core is probably a loneliness. Even though I had plenty of friends, I always felt like I needed to be in a relationship, like I needed to be dating a girl. And so I was always looking for that in high school. I got in this relationship with a girl probably at the end of freshman year, and then it went over into sophomore year. And it was because I was looking for satisfaction and joy in being in a relationship, it took hold of me in a way that it never should. And so I made decisions in that relationship that I regret to this day. We'll just get really vulnerable here, Johnny. This is why we started this podcast, right? Just encourage men to do this. But I did not value her purity or my own purity in that relationship. And not only that, which that led to, I think, creating these emotional ties that it was like I don't know how to describe it, but I quit like hanging out with my friends as much because she like wanted me to spend all my time, as much time as possible with her. And then because I was trying to be satisfied in that, find joy in that, I was doing it. And so, I would lie to my friends about, not being able to hang out because I was really going to hang out with her, but I would tell them I was doing something else. And it just got to the point where it was a really toxic, unhealthy relationship. And I had my part to play in it and, all the things. So there was one time I was hanging out with my friends, and it was actually at my house, and we always hung out at my house. We had a basement. And I remember we were sitting around, and it was late in the night. I don't remember how the conversation came up, but there was pretty much like this intervention with my buddies, and they sat me down and they said, hey man, like, you are not yourself in this relationship. And like, we know you're lying about going to hanging out with her and not hanging out with us. Like, we barely see you anymore. Like, what's going on, pretty much. And similar to your friend, I got pretty upset and I felt ambushed. I felt attacked. And so I was like, what? I'm not taking this. So I went upstairs and went to bed. But Johnny, I look back on that moment and I am so thankful. Man, I'm about to tear up.
Come on, you're good.
I'm
Keep
I'm
being
so
real.
Yeah. I'm so incredibly thankful for the friends that I have and for the fact that they loved me enough to do that. To even though they knew it would make me mad, they knew it would make me frustrated, that they did it anyways because they wanted better for me. And I still look back on that at being I didn't learn my lesson immediately. Okay, I still made mistakes after that. But boy, was that a turning point for me. And was that a moment where the Lord used my friends to really give me a wake up call. And so yeah, that I love those guys. They were all groomsmen in my wedding along with you, Johnny. And so I have friends like that will step up and say something because they care. That is a treasure that should never be taken for granted.
How much courage. I mean, they probably were thinking about that more than just that one day.
Yeah.
Like for my
Mhm.
instance, he asked me and it happened so fast. But for your instance, they might have been talking about and building the courage up. And it happens more times than not when you confront somebody, they're not happy when you confront them.
Yep.
But you got to know that if you're doing this for a greater purpose, hopefully they will come around on the end for that. So praise God for
Yeah.
both scenarios.
And we all have blind spots, right? That
Yeah.
we can't see ourselves, and we need other people to point those out. And now I'm thankful for, having Haley, because she does that for me too. So that's just, you need people in your life that can call out your blind spots, or you're just going to get puffed up with pride and it's going to lead to your own destruction. And so I'm thankful for men in my life who are willing to not let me just self implode, but they got me back on the right path.
No, for sure. So now, not trying to take away from this moment, but we got a ton of questions. What I'm super grateful.
We got to keep rolling.
Yeah.
We got to keep rolling.
Is that this next question says, it's a little more lighthearted. It says, would social media being banned as a whole be a good thing on mental health? Why or why not? So social media being banned as a whole be a good thing on mental health? Why or why not?
This is a great question.
It's
And
a great question.
we kind of teased it last week talking about TikTok potentially being banned. So this is probably where this question came from. My answer would be social media has its pros, and I've benefited from a lot of the positives of social media. We use social media for this podcast. Like, the reason we can do this and reach guys with this message of healing and just friendship and community is because social media exists. So I will acknowledge that. However, the older I get and the longer I've been around social media, the more I start to wonder if the pros outweigh the cons. And I've been reading just a lot about like how we change as people, and what I've come to find is, just neurologically speaking, what we focus on, contemplate, think about, give our attention to is ultimately what shapes who we are. And what social media does is it is choosing what is put in front of you that is going to have a part to play in shaping who you become. So unfortunately, the way it's set up, if you're a dude who has struggled with pornography and they throw all these videos and pictures of women in front of you, that's going to shape you into a certain type of person who probably has a lustful heart, who's lusting after women, and who stays addicted to pornography. And that's not the case for everybody, but even if you're not looking for that stuff, social media will throw it in front of you just because you're a guy, which is really unfortunate. And on the flip side of that, if you're really into politics, and social media is putting all this angry, divisive political posts and political videos on your feed, that's probably going to shape you to become an angry and divisive, political, passionate person. And then I'll even take it to the sports level. If on a sports standpoint, if the only people you watch that cover your team are negative, cynical, and pessimistic, guess what type of fan you're going to be? Negative, cynical, and pessimistic. And if you actually think about it, there's a lot of truth to this. So I think that's the biggest con to social media is you're giving your thought and attention and time to something that is going to shape you, yet you don't get to pick what you're looking at on it. A company is picking, and all they care about is how long your eyes are on the screen, because that's how they make money. So they don't care if it harms you or is good for you or not. But on the flip side, I told you guys how much I was on social media last year. So I'm saying this after a lot of self-reflection. This year, Johnny set the passcode on the timer for me. I only get 10 minutes a day on all social media platforms. So I pretty much only have time to post for this podcast, and that's it. And man, has my thoughts and my brain been so much more clear and so much more healthy this year than it was last year. And I'm spending more time learning things that I didn't know before. I'm spending more time focusing on Jesus, focusing on others, being more present with people, more in the moment. And I feel like it's shaping me to be a more loving and compassionate and gracious person. So that's a long answer to that question. I would say social media being banned as a whole, or at least being restricted significantly, would be a fantastic thing for mental health. And I'll just say, if you're someone who is like really anxious all the time, social media is great at putting things in front of you that stir up fear, that stir up anxiety. And so if you're on social media a lot and you're really anxious, there probably is a connection there. Or if you feel really lonely and depressed and you're on social media a lot, I would argue there's a connection there, because you're probably seeing posts of people hanging out with other people. And then it makes you think about how you're not hanging out with anybody, or not doing the fun thing, or not doing the cool thing. And it's just a spiral. So there's a really good book called The Anxious Generation by John Haidt that I would highly recommend. Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, we've mentioned, by John Mark Comer, has really opened my eyes on a lot of this stuff. So yeah, social media is shaping you whether you think it is or not. And you just got to ask the question, is it shaping me for better or for worse? And I think it's different for each person. Like, Haley finds so many good recipes and things like that on social media, and she's not on it all the time. So I think she has a healthy relationship with it. So it just depends. I don't know. What do you think, Johnny?
I mean, you said a lot of good things, so I'm not going to say too much on it, but I'm thinking that, have you ever seen the movie The Purge?
Yes.
Okay, it's a very creepy movie, but there's a point in there to where, the siren goes off and this is when all laws are done. What if we had a purge where the siren go off and all social media we banned for like a week and we turned off and you couldn't even get on it? So, because I think social media is good. I've used it a lot for my mental health. Like, I found a lot of good podcasts and a lot of good quotes. And I heard this really good podcast called For My Dogs, which is really good for my mental health. But you're right. It can be negative. We don't need to be on all the time. So I think we should create a purge with sirens and everything and ban social media like 1 week every month. That's my solution.
Yeah, just like a fast almost.
Yeah, a fast.
Because the purpose of fasting is to increase your dependence on God and not on food, and to kind of say, Lord, I have these desires and this hunger, and that needs to be satisfied, but I'm looking to you to satisfy it instead of looking to myself. And so a fast from social media, yeah, I think that would do a lot of good for us to not try and be satisfied by, likes or shares or whatever it is, but to be just more present in the world would be a really good thing. Because now that it's blocked and I'm out in public, I notice how much we miss out on like interacting with new people or with strangers, because anytime someone has a quiet down moment, they're pulling out their phone to scroll.
Yeah.
And now that I can't I'm just like looking around, twiddling my thumbs. During the national championship or one of the playoff games, it was a commercial break. And normally that would be when I would pull out my phone and scroll, but I couldn't. And so I literally just got up and started walking around the house, because I was like, well, I don't want to just sit here and watch commercials. But it's really eye opening once you do take a step back from it. So yeah, I would recommend at least detoxing for a period of time. Not saying you got to give yourself 10 minutes a day like I've done. That's just the decision I had to make for me. But at least do some form of detox from it on a regular basis if you can. That would be awesome.
Yeah, it'll be healthy. So I think we might have time for one more question.
Yeah, probably.
One more question.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what we get to.
All right.
So the next one is, what is something you've worked on about yourself that you can now say you're good at?
So I asked Claire this question because I think it's like one thing I think is asking about yourself. I think sometimes it's good to ask someone else because you might, like you said, like everyone has blind spots. You might think you're doing good when you're not, or you think you're doing bad when you're doing good. So I asked Claire and I said, hey, what's one thing that I've been working on that you think I'm doing really good at now? And she said that I've been doing really well at prioritizing her. And she said, not that I've been like neglecting her, but I've done a really good job of like being very intentional. And like every morning I wake up, I make her coffee, I make myself coffee, and I make sure that her and I read together. Because we used to just make coffee and we wouldn't read all the time, but now I'm like, okay, we need to read the Bible together. So we've been reading the Bible together since the beginning of January. It's been really cool. And so like I do that, and I go and after I make my coffee and we do that and I get ready, I go crank her car up and get it ready and get the heat going for her because it's been cold the past few mornings. And because the morning time is like Claire and I's time where we're like the most energetic in a way, because after work we're both very dead. And so I've been trying really hard to make it an effort to put her first and to serve her in the mornings. And so yeah, so that's one thing that I've been doing good at. That. Like I would not say that for myself, but that's what Claire said.
Yeah. And even just, hearing you say that made me think of one for me personally, which is just my communication with Haley. I feel like it's gotten a lot better. There's a article from the Gottman Institute, which if you've ever heard about them, I think they're a counseling agency or something like that, but they specifically focus on relationships. And they have like what they call the 4 horsemen of relationships. And if you're familiar with the book of Revelation, the 4 horsemen are like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So what they're saying is these 4 things typically, if unchecked, are what leads to the end of relationships. And this guy Gottman, he could predict with up to like 96% accuracy whether couples would stay together or not, just watching them walk out of church together, which I was like, that's mind blowing. I don't even know how you would go about doing that. But anyways, so the 4 things are contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So whenever I saw this article, I think it was John Mark Comer in a sermon or something, or a podcast was talking about it. And I was like, I wonder what that is. Went and read it. I recognized immediately that my 2 like defense mechanisms, I guess you could say, in whenever Haley and I are having a conversation where there's conflict, is I either get defensive and try and just like argue tooth and nail that, what I did actually isn't that wrong, without like acknowledging how Haley feels and just like listening first and foremost. I immediately jump to like thinking about how I'm actually right and how she needs to think I'm right, and that's all I care about. Or I just like shut down, which is what stonewalling is. So those are my 2 like tendencies. And luckily, I'm so thankful I found that article, because once I realized that and just became aware, it was a blind spot for me, like we were talking about earlier. But once I became aware of it, over time, I started to like pick up on it more when I was doing it, and I could kind of like scale it back. But then when we started couples counseling, she gave us even more tools that help with not going there, such as like, if you feel like you're stonewalling, one of the things I suggest to do is to take a time out. So like, if you're in a conversation, it's not going well, and you're just like, whatever, I'm just going to shut down and just quit talking and, whatever. they recommend to say, hey, I feel like I'm about to shut down. Could we maybe take a break? Whether that's 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, however long it needs to be. But if you're the one taking the time out, you got to set the time to come back and talk about it again. Because what that does is it allows the part of your brain that is stirring up emotion and turning off your ability to have logic and reason and empathy. It allows it to calm down and come back to normal so that you can have logic and reason and empathy, so you can re-enter the conversation. So that's been something that's been really helpful for us in our marriage, is just getting better at communication. That started with me just realizing that I don't need to get defensive every time. And I also don't need to just shut down when I don't feel like I can defend myself.
Nice. Yeah, I think another one for me was I was leaving work on Thursday, I think. And as I'm leaving work, a fellow teacher said that she really admires my work-life balance. Because I don't, and I didn't even really recognize that in myself, but I used to stay late, really late. And then I would get home and I would work more. And I'm not staying late now because I'm being more organized, and I don't do any work at home. And so because there's teachers, man, who will stay there to 5 or 6, and you know what? Sometimes you have to. So I'm not putting them down at all. But for me, it was not good for me mentally to do that. And so it was really cool hearing someone else tell me, hey, I look up, I really admire your work-life balance. So the only reason why I'm being able to say these things like that is because, sometimes I've fallen short of the other one.
Yeah. And I just thought of another one too. When I was in the student pastor role and I was, battling a minor form of depression, it was easy to stay focused on the negative and on what was going wrong. And that just kind of made it spiral into even a worse place. And one habit I've put into practice since then, I forget where I heard it from first, but I write down every morning, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, and I actually think about them. And so what that's doing is it's training my brain to look for the positives throughout my day, because I'm starting my day looking for the positives. And so I try to think of 3 different things. It's not like I'm writing the same 3 things down every day. I try to think of something specific to the day before that I'm thankful for. And it's just been such a game changer for my mindset, for my mental health. And I find that it's actually helping me in my job just be full of joy that I get to do what I do, because I take time to be truly grateful for it. I love the job I'm in now. I love what I get to do every day. I love the people I get to work with, and it's just such a blessing. And taking time to think about that and be grateful for it has affected my mindset overall. So yeah, that would be another one. But Johnny, I think we can maybe do 2 more questions this episode, because I know we got a lot more we got to get to in the next one. So, and I want to do both of these at the same time, or actually there's 3 that kind of go together, but we'll try and do them in a timely manner. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So the first one is, how does the desire to be perfect before going to God hold people back from religion? Do you have any thoughts you want to share first to kick us off?
Yeah, I think this comes, it's my favorite quote on this is from Brody. He's one of the directors at the camp that Tucker and I used to work at. And he's talking about this, and he's explaining at the dentist. And he was like, there's no point of he's like, I find it funny that when people go to the dentist, they really try to brush their teeth really well the day before to make sure that the dentist, is impressed with them. But he goes, there's no point of doing that, because they're going to clean your teeth regardless. That's why you're there, is to clean your teeth. And so he says, don't worry about, trying to get everything perfect before you see, before, you actually start thinking about this Christian thing, because God is meant, God's purpose, what God's trying to do is to save you and to cleanse you from your sins. And so don't think you have to get everything right before you can become a Christian. That's what God's job is to do. is to make you clean. And I want to talk about this is with sanctification. There's no such thing as like sanctification is a big Christian word that means becoming more like Christ. And you will never in your Christian walk get to the end of this climb and get on top of this mountain of sanctification and say, I'm there, I am finally like Christ while you're here on earth. You will never do that. You will constantly be every day trying to be more like Christ. So even when you are a Christian, you still won't be perfect. But that is what being a Christian is trying every day to become more like him. You're going to have falls. You're going to have bad days. But if you keep trying to be more like him, that's what it means to be a Christian. So don't try to be perfect because you're never going to be even after you become a Christian.
Yeah, and that, Paul talks about that in Philippians where he's telling them to press on towards what lies ahead, but he says, it's not that I've attained it. I'm not there yet either. I'm also still working towards this, still running the race that God's called me to run, and just trying to get better along the way. So I feel like the reason that people have that feeling of like, I need to clean myself up and, before coming to God is not because of their understanding of Jesus. It's because they're trying to see Jesus through the lens of people who are religious, who aren't giving them a good example of who Jesus is. And a good example of this is the Pharisees in Scripture, right? Jesus straight up tells them, you clean up the outside of the dish for everybody else to see, but inside your hearts are wicked and deceitful and rebellious. And when religious people are like that, like people who claim to be Christian, when they put on this persona of like, you can't drink, you can't get tattoos, you can't smoke, you can't do this, you can't do that. And they're all about the rules and they're telling you that other people that you can't do that. And they're being really judgmental. And yet their hearts aren't being changed by the love of Jesus on the inside. I feel like that is what's created this sense of, well, I got to clean myself up before I come to the Lord. It's not Jesus who's given that image or that thought, but it's people who claim to represent Jesus who have done that. This breaks my heart because I feel like too often we as human beings get in the way of people encountering the love of Jesus. And I know people that I love dearly who this is their reason for not coming to Jesus, is because they see people who claim Christ who don't behave or aren't seeming to grow in becoming more like Christ. And it just keeps them from ever experiencing who Jesus truly is. And that would be my plea with anyone listening to this, is before you go and base your opinion on Jesus, people who claim him behave like or talk like or act like, please go read the Gospels and find out who Jesus is. Don't let other people interpret Jesus to you for you. Go look at it for yourself. Paul I can't remember what book he's in, but he's given this speech to the Greek people at the time who aren't religious, who don't know the Lord. They often worship pagan gods. And he's talking to them and he says, God's not far from any of you if you would just reach out and find him. He's there. Jesus says, if you seek me, you will find me if you seek me with all of your heart. And so my plea would be, you don't need to clean yourself up before going to Jesus. He just wants you to seek him out. Go find him for yourself. Don't let other humans get in your way of encountering Jesus. And for those of us who are Christians, who do know Jesus, one thing we need to keep in mind is that Jesus spent more time with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes than he did with the religious elite and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the people in the temple. Now, he spent the most time with his disciples, who he was training up to be like him and to love people like he was loving them. But he was criticized for eating dinner and hanging out with tax collectors and prostitutes and those that would have been viewed as the most sinful people in society. And so for us as Christians, how dare we make someone like that feel like they got to clean themselves up before coming to God, when our God in human form went to them and loved them where they were. So yeah, sorry, I got on a little rant, there. But that's such a good question, and I see it happen all the time. Just go to Jesus for yourself. Don't let other people get in the way of you reaching out and finding Jesus. Any
No,
thing you want to add?
for sure. No,
Okay.
that was really good. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is a big issue. And like I said before, Gandhi's quote is, "I love your God, but I hate your Christians." And it gets, and it's very true. And I said again, like in the South, with Christians in the South. So if you're listening as a Christian, let's try to be aware of that. Now, for the next question.
Well,
Go ahead.
Johnny, let's stop it there. I feel like that's a good stopping place, and we'll hit these other questions on the next one. Does that sound good to you?
Good to me, man.
Okay. So let's reflect a little bit on what we talked about so far. All right. So we hit NIL, transfer portal, all that good stuff, state of college football today. I thought that was a good conversation. I feel like, we're not saying anything different from what a lot of other people are saying about it. But the fact that those questions were asked mean it's something that's on a lot of people's minds, especially if you are a college football fan. And I think people are fearful of college football changing to the point where it's unrecognizable from what it was. And just to, go back to it, I think college football will always be amazing like it always has been. And it because the traditions and the passion of the fan base will always, always be there. And that's what I feel like separates college football from other sports leagues. So, we talked about that. We talked about youth sports and specialization. We talked about early predictions for next year and then reflecting on best and worst plays from this last season. So we had a lot of football talk on this episode, which was fun. And we were so glad you guys asked those. Then we moved more into the serious route to, we had some questions that were more on the religious side of things, which I think is something that it's on a lot of people's minds, whether they claim to be of faith or not. The reality is most people are contemplating God and spending time thinking about God, whether they believe in a God or not. They're still thinking about it. So those questions are very valid. I'm glad they were brought up. And then we also had questions about just what it looks like to be a good friend and calling your brothers out when that needs to happen. And we stayed true to our mission statement, Johnny. We got a little honest and vulnerable on today's show answering these questions, which I'm thankful for. Both of us did. So that's kind of a tour of where we went today. Johnny, how do you feel about part 1?
Good. Can't wait for part 2, man.
Yeah. So as always, if you're listening to this, you've made it this long, you're almost to an hour and a half. That means you must enjoy this content and find it valuable. So please hit the thumbs up button. If you're on YouTube, hit the follow, subscribe button. That's what helps this podcast grow. It helps it reach more men who need to hear the kind of things that we're talking about. So please do that on your way out. And then we also just want to say that in part 2, we're going to get in. We did a lot of sports questions at the beginning of this one, but there are also a lot of really random, funny questions that we'll cover in the next episode. And then a lot more serious questions. We'll have some more that are about, religion, Christianity, and then also some more about friendship, vulnerability, honesty, all those good things. So please come back next week for part 2 of our mailbag episode. And now, for all of you out there, go be a dog today.
And go be there for your dogs.